The war had left scars not only on planets but also on the people who carried its weight in their hearts. Stars that once shone with wonder now looked like cold reminders of battles fought and lives lost. In that silence of the galaxy, where alliances were fragile and trust was rare, survival was the only law that mattered. Private Elias Monroe, a young human soldier, never imagined he would be stationed on Station Vera. The station was not Earth-like. Its walls glowed with faint light that came from within the crystals built into its structure. The air smelled faintly metallic and voices echoed strangely in the corridors, as if the station itself was listening. It was built by the Shayren, tall crystalline beings who were considered allies of humanity. Allies, yes, but not friends. Their alliance was forged in desperation, not in love. Suspicion followed humans everywhere they walked. When Elias first arrived, he expected a small corner, maybe a metal bunk, just enough to sleep. Instead, the officer led him down a quiet hallway and opened a room that was far smaller than he had imagined. Inside was only one bed. Not two, not even separate mats, just one bed large enough for one, maybe two if they were forced to share. And standing there, waiting with calm eyes that glowed faintly like stars caught in crystal, was Kale, the Shayren medic. Elias had seen Shayren before, but never this close. Kale's skin shimmered faintly, smooth like polished stone, with light glowing beneath as if his veins were filled with starlight. He stood taller than Elias, his frame slender yet strong, his voice low and steady. There was something about him that felt both alien and comforting, like the deep hum of the station itself. For a moment, neither spoke. Two soldiers from two species trapped by circumstance staring at the single bed they were expected to share. It was Kale who broke the silence. His words were quiet, but they carried weight. Like a promise that was more than just personal, it was cultural, ancient. "There is one rule," Kale said. His voice resonated as if the crystals in the room listened. "We share the bed because the station grows cold at night. But we must never let love begin. Do you understand?" Elias blinked, caught off guard. Of all the things he expected, warnings about hygiene, about respect, about boundaries, he never thought love would be the forbidden line. He gave a nervous laugh, more to himself than to Kale. "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile. "No problem. I'm not here for love. Just sleep." But even as he said it, a strange unease crawled through his chest. Why make a rule about something that should have been obvious? Why forbid something that in his mind could never happen? Humans and Shayren were too different, too far apart. Still, Elias nodded, agreeing to the rule. At that moment, he truly believed it would be easy. The first nights were strange. The bed was wide enough, but not meant for comfort with two bodies. Elias lay on the very edge, blanket clutched tightly around him, refusing to shift closer. Kale lay on the opposite side, his faint glow painting the room in soft light. Elias could not stop himself from glancing sometimes, wondering how a being could look both so fragile and so unbreakable. The station's nights were freezing. The walls leaked cold into the room, and though Elias tried to stay wrapped in his blanket, he often woke shivering. Sometimes, half asleep, he felt warmth at his back, a gentle, steady presence. Kale's body radiated heat like a living fire. It was instinct, Elias told himself, not choice, survival, not comfort. They shared warmth because the cold would not forgive distance. Still, every morning they rose without a word. Kale would move with quiet grace, checking his medical kit before duty. Elias would pull on his uniform, brushing off the memory of warmth as though it had never happened. They did not speak of the closeness nor the rule. It hung unspoken like a fragile glass wall between them, and yet even in those first nights Elias felt something he did not want to admit. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of things unspoken, of questions he dared not ask. Who was Kale beneath the glow? Did he feel the same weight of loneliness, the same ache for something more than just survival? Elias did not know. He only knew one thing. The rule existed for a reason. And sometimes the rules that sound the simplest are the hardest to keep. The days on Station Vera passed slowly, but the nights stretched even longer. The corridors of the station were never truly quiet. A faint hum echoed from the crystal walls, a sound like breathing, alive yet cold. For Elias, those nights became the hardest part of his duty. He had faced gunfire, exhaustion, hunger, and yet it was the silence of sharing a single bed with Kale that unsettled him most. At first, Elias did everything he could to keep distance. He pressed himself against the very edge of the mattress, clinging to his thin blanket as if it were armor. He kept his back turned, his body stiff, determined not to brush against Cale. The rule repeated itself in his head like a warning. Do not let love begin. Cale, on the other hand, was quiet in a different way. He did not move much at night. His body glowed faintly, a constant reminder that he was not human, not someone Elias could ever mistake for familiar. Yet that same glow painted the room in a gentle light, soft and steady like a candle in the dark. Elias found himself staring at it sometimes the way children stare at stars. The station's heating was unreliable. Some nights the air grew so cold that Elias's breath came out in fog. No blanket could keep the chill away. More than once he woke in the middle of the night shivering so hard his teeth hurt. And each time he discovered the same thing. Warmth pressed close behind him. Cale. At first Elias thought it was an accident. That maybe Cale shifted in his sleep, unaware of the closeness. But then he realized Cale was always still, always steady, as if he chose to stay that way, not moving closer but not pulling away either, offering warmth without words, comfort without explanation. Elias told himself it was survival. The cold was dangerous after all. Sharing heat was natural, practical, nothing more. But still he could not stop his heart from reacting, beating faster, louder whenever he woke with Cale so near. The mornings were the strangest. They dressed without speaking of it. Cale would rise first, his movements graceful, almost ritualistic. He cleaned the room, folded his blanket neatly, checked his medical kit with careful hands. Elias followed slower, clumsier, pretending the night's closeness meant nothing. But silence can become heavy. It was not the silence of strangers nor the silence of enemies. It was the silence of two souls trapped in the same space, learning each other's rhythms without ever speaking them aloud. Elias began to notice things he never expected. The way Cale tilted his head when he listened, the faint hum that escaped him when he worked, the kindness in his eyes whenever another soldier passed by with wounds. One evening, after a long shift, Elias returned to find Cale sitting on the edge of the bed. His glow dimmer than usual. He looked tired, though Elias could not imagine how a being made of crystal could look tired. Elias wanted to ask if he was all right, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he sat quietly beside him. For a long moment, they just shared the silence. The rule hung between them, unspoken but sharp. It made Elias feel like a thief of his own heart, wanting to reach but holding back. That night, sleep came slowly. Elias lay awake staring at the faint shimmer of Cale's skin. He thought about Earth, about nights when he used to lie in bed with his window open, listening to rain tapping against glass. The memory made his chest ache. He wanted to share it, to speak, to tell Cale what rain sounded like, what home felt like. But he did not. Words would be dangerous. Instead, he closed his eyes. He let the warmth come when the cold crept in. Let Cale's presence shield him without asking questions. It was strange, Elias thought, how silence could hold so much. A silence that was not empty but full of things unsaid. Every night it grew heavier, every night harder to ignore. The rule still stood like an invisible wall. But Elias was beginning to understand something. Walls are not always strong. Sometimes they only wait for the smallest crack to fall apart. The war did not ask permission before it arrived. It came with alarms that screamed through Station Vera in the middle of the night, pulling every soldier from their beds and throwing them into chaos. Elias had been half asleep when the first siren wailed. The room shook with the tremor of explosions, and the faint glow of Cale's skin flickered in the dark. Both men jumped to their feet without speaking, pulling on boots, reaching for weapons. The silence of nights replaced by the roar of battle. The corridors filled with shouts and running footsteps. Human soldiers rushed past Sharon guards, their movements clumsy beside the tall, graceful beings. The enemy had boarded a surprise strike. Blaster fire rattled in the distance. The smell of smoke crept into the air. Elias ran with the others, his rifle in hand, his heart pounding. But fate does not always wait for courage. At one corner of the corridor, the ceiling cracked with a violent blast. Shards of crystal and fire rained down. Elias barely managed to dive behind a support beam, but pain flared hot across his arm. When he stumbled back to his feet, blood was already soaking through his sleeve. He tried to keep moving, tried to ignore the sting, but his steps slowed. He felt weak. The hallway spun. Before he could collapse, a steady hand caught his shoulder. Elias. The voice was calm, low, certain. It was Cale. Elias tried to brush it off. It's nothing. Just a scratch. His words shook more than he wanted them to. But Cale's luminous eyes searched him, sharp and filled with something Elias had never seen so clearly before. Fear. Not fear of battle, fear for him. Without asking, Cale pressed glowing hands to the wound. Light spread like liquid fire across Elias's skin. He hissed at the sudden warmth, but then the pain began to fade. His heartbeat steadied. His breathing slowed. The bleeding stopped. Kyle's gift was not just healing, it was comfort, a promise woven into touch. Stay still, Cale whispered. His voice trembled slightly, though his hands did not. If you move, I cannot mend it properly. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to laugh it off as if it were nothing. But he couldn't. His throat tightened, words caught somewhere between pride and gratitude. He simply nodded and let Cale work. The chaos of the battle seemed far away in that moment. The screams and blasts were muted, as if the whole station had drawn back to leave space for this fragile, glowing circle of two. Elias looked up at Cale's face, at the cracks of light running beneath the smooth surface of his skin, and for the first time he saw not just an ally, not just a medic. He saw a soul carrying the same weight, the same fear of loss. Something shifted in him then. Something quiet, dangerous, and undeniable. When Cale finished, he pulled his hands away slowly. The wound was gone, the blood dried, but his eyes lingered on Elias a little too long, and in that silence Elias knew the rule had bent. Not broken, not yet, but bent and bending further. Elias forced a shaky laugh. Guess I owe you one. Cale tilted his head slightly, his glow dimmer, softer. You owe me nothing, he said. Then after a pause almost too quiet to hear, just be careful. I do not want to see you fall. Elias felt the words strike deeper than any wound. No one had said that to him in months. No one had cared enough to. And now this alien, this rule-bound being, had shown more fear for his life than Elias himself carried. As the two of them moved back toward the fight, Elias could not shake the weight in his chest. The rule still stood, but cracks had formed. And he knew well enough. Once cracks appear, walls do not stay standing forever. That night, when the battle was finally over and the station returned to its humming silence, Elias lay awake in their shared bed. He felt the warmth of Cale's presence beside him, steady and strong, and his heart refused to calm. He remembered the fear in Cale's eyes, the trembling in his voice. It was not just duty. It was something more, and Elias could no longer pretend he did not feel it too. Time after the raid moved strangely. Days felt long, nights felt even longer. The station worked hard to repair itself, patching cracks and sealing wounds, but people were slower to heal. Soldiers carried tired eyes, and whispers of fear followed every patrol. For Elias, the silence of the nights had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers forced to share a bed. It had grown heavier, warmer, alive with what was left unsaid. Each time Elias lay beside Cale, he remembered the fear in those glowing eyes, the steady hands pressing light into his wound. That memory refused to fade. He tried to distract himself. He talked more with the other soldiers, spent extra hours in the training room, even volunteered for shifts he didn't need. But at the end of every day, he always returned to the same small room, the same single bed, the same rule that grew weaker each night. Kyle, too, seemed changed. He was still quiet, still graceful, but Elias noticed the difference. The glow in his chest dimmed faster when he was tired. He sat longer before sleeping, sometimes humming faint notes that echoed faintly through the walls. And most of all, he looked at Elias with an expression that carried weight, something careful, something waiting. It happened on a night that felt too still. Outside, the stars drifted past the viewing windows, cold and bright. Inside, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Cale sat upright at the edge of the bed. For a while, Cale said nothing, only tapped his fingers gently against the crystal wall as though listening to its reply. Then Cale spoke. His voice was soft, but it broke the silence like a blade. Elias, do you ever wish the rule was not there? The question struck harder than any explosion. Elias froze, his breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, eyes wide. Cale did not look at him directly. Instead, he stared at the floor, his glow faint, as if afraid of the answer. For a long moment, Elias said nothing. His heart pounded so loud he feared Cale could hear it. He remembered the first night, the warning, the one rule that had seemed so simple. He remembered his own words, no problem. I'm not here for love. But now those words felt like lies. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he whispered, every night. The air in the room seemed to change. The walls hummed lower, the cold felt softer. Kale's head turned slowly toward him, his eyes wide with something fragile. Hope, fear, maybe both. You should not, Kale said at last, though the strength in his voice was gone. It is dangerous for you, for me. Elias sat up, unable to hold back anymore. I know, he said. I know what the rule means. I know what it would cost. But I can't help it. I didn't choose this, Kale, it just happened. For the first time since Elias had met him, Kyle looked uncertain. His glow flickered softly like a flame fighting wind. He clasped his hands together as though holding himself steady. My people, they do not forgive. If they knew, they would see me as a traitor. And your commanders, your soldiers, would they not call you weak? Would they not tear you away from me? Elias felt the truth in every word. Yes, they would. Humans would laugh, punish, exile. The Shiren would do worse. Love between species was more than forbidden. It was dangerous. And yet, as he looked at Kale, Elias felt a fire inside him. Let them try, he said softly. I'd rather break a rule than break what's growing between us. Kale closed his eyes, his shoulders trembling. Silence stretched once again, but it was no longer the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of two hearts standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying. When Kale opened his eyes again, they glowed brighter, but his voice carried sadness. Elias, I do not know if I am strong enough to fight my people, but I know this, I cannot unfeel what I feel. The words lingered in the small room like sparks waiting for fire. That night, they did not cross the invisible line. They did not touch, did not kiss, did not let the silence break into action. But the rule was no longer whole. It had cracked fully now, wide enough that both of them could see through it. And once a wall lets in light, there's no way to make it solid again. The words they shared that night stayed with them like an echo impossible to forget. Elias carried them through every patrol, every duty, every moment of silence. Kale's confession had cracked the rule wide open. But cracks once visible only grew. Still, fear was a powerful thing. Rumors began to spread across Station Vera. Whispers carried in the mess hall, in the training rooms, even in the medical bay. Humans were saying that some of their own were getting too close to the Shiren. Nothing direct, never names, but the tone was sharp, full of suspicion. The alliance was fragile, and everyone knew it. Friendship was acceptable. Trust was tolerable. But intimacy? That was betrayal. Elias felt the stares. Sometimes he caught other soldiers glancing at him and Kale when they walked together down the corridors. Too close, their eyes seemed to say. Too comfortable. It made Elias's skin prickle. Kale noticed too. He said nothing for days. But the glow in his chest dimmed earlier at night as though the whispers pressed heavy on him. When Elias finally asked, Kyle answered with words that chilled him. My people are listening as well. The council watches. If they believe I have broken the rule, they will not only punish me, they will break me. Shiren punishment is not gentle. Elias stared at him, heart sinking. He wanted to ask what break meant, but he already knew. The Shiren were crystalline. Breaking meant death. That night they lay in the same bed, but farther apart than ever before. The space between them felt colder than the station air. Elias curled tight beneath his blanket, fighting the urge to shift closer, to reach for the warmth that had once come so naturally. The rule hung over them again, heavier than before, reinforced by fear. But no amount of distance could erase what had already begun. Elias closed his eyes, and all he saw was Kale's face, lit faintly in the dark, carrying an expression that was both strong and unbearably lonely. The next day, tension grew worse. A human officer made a cutting remark during inspection, his eyes lingering on Elias. Careful where your loyalties lie, Private. Some walls should never be crossed. The words were casual, almost a joke, but the meaning was sharp as a knife. Elias clenched his fists but said nothing. To argue would only prove suspicion true. Later, when the officer was gone, Elias found Kyle in the medical wing, tending to wounded soldiers. He moved with quiet focus, but his hands trembled faintly as he healed. When their eyes met across the room, Kale gave no smile, no warmth. Only caution. After the shift, they walked back to their quarters in silence. The The station hummed cold and endless. When the door closed behind them, Elias could no longer hold the weight in his chest. Cale's expression was pained, because the universe is not built on fairness. It is built on rules, Elias, and rules crush those who try to break them. Elias stepped closer, his fists trembling at his sides. And what about us? What about what we feel? Are we just supposed to pretend it doesn't exist? Pretend we don't exist? For a long time, Cale said nothing. His glow flickered like a dying flame. Finally, he whispered, I am afraid. Not for myself, for you. The words broke something inside Elias. He wanted to shout, to argue, to tear down every wall that kept them apart. But instead, he only stood there, heart pounding, realizing that love had already begun, whether they admitted it or not. That night, the bed felt colder than ever. They lay back to back, both awake, both silent. Neither reached across the gap, though both longed to. Fear had returned, stronger than before. But even fear could not erase what had been spoken, because once love begins, it cannot be unlearned. The war did not wait for hearts to make decisions. It came suddenly like a storm breaking through silence. Station Vera shook with violence one night, harder than it ever had before. Sirens screamed, lights flickered, and soldiers rushed through the corridors with weapons ready. This time it was no small raid. The enemy had come in full force, determined to tear the Alliance apart. Elias grabbed his rifle, his hands shaking not with fear but with adrenaline. Cale stood beside him, the glow from his chest burning brighter than usual. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary now. Both knew the truth. Tonight, survival was not guaranteed. The corridors filled with fire. Explosions tore through walls, sending shards of crystal across the floor. Human voices shouted orders while the Sharon answered with their deep, vibrating tones. The enemy poured in, dark and relentless, and the station became a battlefield of steel and light. Elias fought with everything he had. His rifle burned hot, his body ached, but he kept moving, kept pushing forward. And wherever he turned, Cale was there, steady, glowing, healing those who fell, lifting them back into the fight. They moved like two halves of the same rhythm, soldier and medic, weapon and light. But war is cruel, and it does not honor love. When a section of the station's blast door collapsed, the enemy surged through in a wave. Elias and Cale were caught in the middle. The explosion threw Elias hard against the wall. Dust and smoke filled his lungs. He coughed, struggling to rise, and then he saw it. Another charge glowing, ready to detonate. There was no time. Kyle's eyes met his. In that single glance, Elias understood what was about to happen. No, Elias shouted, trying to push forward, but Cale moved faster. With a cry that rang like breaking crystal, Cale shoved Elias out of the blast's reach. The detonation came an instant later. The world roared. When the smoke cleared, Elias staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. And there, amid the rubble, amid the shattered shards of crystal, lay Cale. His chest was cracked, his glow flickering weakly, as if the light inside him was fighting to stay alive. Elias dropped his rifle and ran to him. He knelt, hands trembling as he gathered Kyle into his arms. No, stay with me, Cale. Don't you dare leave me. His voice broke. His eyes burned with tears he could not stop. Cale's body was heavy, fragile in a way Elias had never seen before. Cracks ran along his arms, his chest faint light leaking through like a dying star. He tried to speak, his voice weak but still steady. I told you. One rule, Kyle whispered. Don't let love begin. Elias shook his head violently. Stop, don't you say that. Don't you dare. His hands pressed against Cale's cracks as if he could hold him together. You saved me. You can't leave me like this. Not when we... His voice broke again. He swallowed hard. Not when we've already broken the rule. Cale's glowing eyes softened. For the first time, his lips curved in the faintest smile. Then I failed, he whispered. Because love did begin. Elias's tears fell hot against Kyle's shattered skin. He bent low, his forehead pressed to Cale's. No, you didn't fail. You saved me. You gave me something worth fighting for. The battle still raged around them, soldiers shouting, weapons firing, explosions echoing through the station. But in that moment, the war felt far away. All that mattered was the fragile, flickering light in Elias's arms, the life he refused to let go. With desperate strength, Elias lifted Kyle. I'm not losing you, he said through clenched teeth. Not now, not ever. And so carrying him through fire and smoke, Elias ran. He ran past soldiers, past falling walls, past the chaos of war. Each step was agony, but he did not stop. He would not stop, because love had begun, and love gave him the power to fight for more than survival. Cale's light did not go out that night. It weakened, yes, flickering like a candle fighting against the wind, but it did not fade completely. Elias carried him through the burning halls of Station Vera, his arms aching, his lungs raw with smoke. Each step was powered not by duty, not by orders, but by something far stronger: love. The medics worked quickly when Elias laid Cale on the table. Human doctors and Sharon healers surrounded him, voices sharp and urgent. Elias was forced back, held at the shoulders by another soldier. He wanted to fight, wanted to stay at Cale's side, but he knew he could not heal him. All he could do was watch, his hands stained with dust and blood, his heart aching with helplessness. Minutes dragged like hours. The room filled with the glow of Sharon healing light, mixing with the harsh beams of human equipment. Elias prayed to gods he did not even believe in. He prayed to the stars, to fate, to anything that would listen. Finally, Cale's light steadied. The cracks across his chest closed, though faint scars of crystal remained. His glow was dimmer, weaker, but alive. Alive. When Elias was finally allowed to approach, Kyle's eyes opened slowly. Weak, yes, but still carrying that soft warmth Elias had come to know. Elias sat beside him, unable to stop the tears that fell freely down his face. "You're alive," Elias whispered. His voice was rough, broken, but full of relief. "You're alive." Kyle's lips curved faintly, a shadow of a smile. "I told you," he whispered back. "The rule was for protection, but I could not keep it. Not with you." Elias reached for his hand, hesitant at first, then firm, his fingers wrapping around Cale's glowing ones. "Then let the rule stay broken," he said. His voice trembled, but his heart was steady. "Because I can't go back. Not after this." For a long time they said nothing. They didn't need to. Their hands remained joined, silent proof of what both already knew. The war did not end that night. Battles continued across the galaxy. Treaties remained fragile. Suspicion lingered in the eyes of both humans and Chiron. Some whispered when they saw Elias and Cale walking together again, closer now than before. Some looked at them with anger, others with disbelief. But there were also a few, just a few, who looked with quiet hope. Because maybe, just maybe, their bond meant something more than forbidden love. Maybe it meant the two species could learn not only to fight beside each other, but to truly care. Elias did not care what the whispers said. He had nearly lost Cale once, and he would not waste the second chance. Each night when they returned to their small quarters, he held Cale close in the single bed. No more pretending. No more edges, no more distance. The warmth between them was no longer just survival. It was life itself. Kyle, too, changed. He still hummed softly at night, still carried the weight of his people's traditions. But he no longer hid his glow when Elias looked at him. He no longer turned away when their hands brushed. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, even when fear still lingered in the corners of his eyes. And Elias understood that love was not about being fearless. It was about choosing to stay, even when fear pressed down. Months later, when the station finally stood fully repaired, Elias and Kyle stood together in the viewing chamber. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold and endless, yet somehow softer now. "Do you ever regret it?" Elias asked quietly. His voice carried no anger, only curiosity. Kyle turned to him, his crystal skin glowing faintly in the starlight. "No," he said firmly, "because the rule was meant to keep love away. But love found us anyway, and it made us stronger." Elias smiled, his hand slipping into Cale's. Together they looked out at the galaxy, beyond the war, beyond the whispers, beyond the fear. For humanity had always been known for many things: courage, stubbornness, survival. But here, in this quiet corner of the universe, Elias showed what humanity truly carried: the reckless, unstoppable power of love. And love, as always, became humanity's greatest victory.